call this August meeting of the Rockingham County Planning Board to order. At this time, I'll ask Mr. Harris to deliver our invocation.
Let us pray. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to meet tonight for our August 12th Rockingham County Planning Board meeting. Lord, just be with us as we review the cases being presented. Help us to come up with a decision to be beneficial to the requesting parties and also to the citizens of Rockingham County. We ask these things in your precious name. Amen.
So we're not approving any minutes tonight, is that right?
And that is entirely my fault because I do not have them ready yet.
Okay. I'll ask our Vice Chairwoman to read our procedures for tonight.
Any and all persons who would like to speak regarding any case being heard by the Planning Board must sign the case file roster prior to the beginning of the meeting. Each speaker must be sworn in by the presiding board member prior to the case hearings. Additionally, each speaker must be recognized by the presiding board member prior to speaking. Unless otherwise specified, all testimony, evidence, and comments should be directed to the board chairperson or presiding board member. Each case will be presented to the board by a member of the planning staff. Following the staff presentation, the case applicant will be given the opportunity to brief the board regarding the case. Following the applicant's presentation, those who have signed up to do so will be granted the opportunity to speak against or in support of the proposal. If needed, the board chairperson reserves the right to set time limits for each speaker. After the public comment period is completed, the applicant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal. This will be followed by board discussion, motions, and voting procedures.
Okay. Because our procedures call for people to be sworn in, I'm going to ask anyone who has either signed up to speak for one of these cases, or if you're an applicant for one of our cases tonight, I ask you to please come forward and be sworn in.
Stand over here.
Mr. Cochran's going to have some Bibles for you to put your hand on.
No. Right hand.
Okay, can you place one hand on the Bible and raise your other hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence and testimony you shall present to the Rockingham County Planning Board on the matters at hand shall be the truth and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Okay, you may be seated for now. Thank you. Our first case is 2019-009. I'll ask our staff to present that at this time.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we're working well. Good evening, Board. It's a pleasure to be in front of you. We have three rezoning cases tonight, the first of which is a request for rezoning from residential agricultural to residential protected. It's an approximate 56 to 57 acre parcel bordered by Gold Hill and Washburn Roads. The owner is Mr. Harry Rakestraw, recently purchased. The subject parcel is currently zoned RA. Adjacent properties are also zoned residential protected and RA. Nearby properties, once you hit 220, are zoned light industrial and highway commercial. The neighborhood is predominantly characterized by residential and agricultural uses, transitioning to industrial and commercial uses along 220. This is a site map that shows you where it is, that shows you the zoning outline that I mentioned along US 220 and the residential protected zoning and residential, including residential mixed, to the east of this parcel that we're looking at here. Excuse me. Of note, there is a freshwater pond and there are two riverines located on this parcel. At this point, that is just a matter to take note of. When it comes time for potential development, that will be taken into account. 1998, originally zoned residential agricultural. This property exceeds the minimum dimensional requirements for the RP zoning district. This request meets a primary goal of the residential development plan of the Rockingham County Land Use Plan, quote unquote, to support the continued viability of single-family homes as a major housing source. This area is also in the rural transition class of the Rockingham County Land Use Plan, which emphasizes lands where residential development is grouped in existing neighborhoods and crossroad community settlements, and where it will occur in similar neighborhoods and settlements during the following year, 20-year period, which was the 20-year period beginning about 2007, as we don't have our new land use plan yet. After reviewing all the application materials, staff concludes that sufficient information has been provided for the application to be processed for consideration by the Planning Board and Board of Commissioners. Please keep in mind this request is for a straight rezoning from RA to RP. No present or future uses can be considered. The board must consider all uses allowed in the RP district. A special note, North Carolina statute prohibits architectural standards for 1- and 2-family dwellings not offered by the applicant, and none have been offered in this case. And home price cannot be considered in the decision for rezoning requests. As mentioned, no testimony referencing any of these factors should be discussed or considered, nor may any testimony of this nature may be considered in making the decision to grant or deny. In some context, based on staff's analysis, we recommend approval of case 2019-009, a request for rezoning from residential agricultural to residential protected. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. I'm sorry. I wanted to see. Okay, yeah, that was the last slide there.
Does anyone have questions for Mr. Cochran?
I will note, I do not see the applicant here tonight. The applicant, as we know, is well known for being incognito for his own rezoning requests. He does not necessarily need to be here for these, as it is a straight rezoning request, but there you go.
Did you get any calls about it?
We did have approximately 6 inquiry phone calls. I'm sorry, I thought I had a slide on that. Oh, I did, on the first page. We received 6 inquiry phone calls, 1 phone call specifically against, and no specific phone calls in support of the request. One thing I did want to make note of is that this is located in the New Bethel Township, which may or may not decide, on the leaning. It is
The
not.
one call that you had that was against it, did they specify their reasons for being against it?
I believe Mrs. Bacon took that call. I don't believe I took that call. Do you remember? I don't recall. I'm sorry. I don't recall. There's a tick mark in the file against. I'm hearing some whispering back here, which might have something to do. It's hard to hear in this room with this. Yeah, I apologize. It's hard to hear in this room. If you have signed up to speak, you will be given the opportunity to speak. Yes.
Mr. Cochran, I can't tell from the map which properties are residential protected and which are residential mixed. It all looks yellow to me.
That was a mapping standard that was sort of decided on recently to group all like properties. It's sort of an APA mapping standard, American Planners Association mapping standard, that we've just instituted on this one, as opposed to dividing it out into the separate RM, RA district, rural commercial, neighborhood commercial, highway commercial. This follows the APA map standard that's recommended, and it's been prepared according to that, which is a new procedure that was just instituted for the map preparation. But part of the parcels in and around this one are zoned residential protected, some are zoned residential mixed.
Does anyone else have questions for Mr. Cochran? Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Rakestraw is not here, is that correct?
He is not.
Okay. Marilyn Ann Sharp. Can you state your name and address?
Marilyn Ann Sharp,
And what's your address, ma'am?
My address is 330 Gold Hill Road, Madison, North Carolina, 27025, 8071.
Okay. What would you like us to know about this application?
What?
What would you like us to know about this application?
Okay. I'm Marilyn Ann Sharp, and my property borders this land on Gold Hill where Faith Dixon and I own 50.5 acres. And it borders the 2 acres where my house is all the way. There's only a fence to us to the back of both of our properties, and both of our properties stop at the same place. When I was little, and until I was in my mid-30s, this 50-plus acres belonged to my father's, William Raymond Sharp's brother, which was John Sharp, and was part of the Sharp estate. Stanley Furniture Company in Martinsville, Virginia, bought and built the horse farm, which had glory days for many years. And earlier before that, my grandfather, John Calvin Sharp, gave the corner, which is now on Washburn and Gold Hill, and it was a school. And that's where my father and all his siblings and all of the ones in that community went to school. And when it stopped being a school, the land came back to my granddaddy. And I understand that Mr. Harry Rakestraw has bought this land, and I want to welcome him to the Gold Hill community. My nephews, Ricky and Randy Sharp, and their boys farm and have always farmed my property. In order to make a little money, since there's not much coming from farming anymore, I also lease my land for hunting. Tobacco is the best crop, money crop, but it's sliding away from us. I just want to know, you be sure that I can retain my agricultural zoning on my property?
Ma'am, we're not rezoning your property.
Okay. So,
Can you tell us, can we see the map and let her show us which land she's talking about?
I think it's the one that needed to be west.
what?
Okay.
You can stay here if you'd like. I'm going to point out on the map where I believe the property is that you're speaking of.
Okay, I'll show you.
Yeah, and I'm going to see if that would be helpful. I believe the area you're speaking about is this area here to the east and that little 2-acre parcel right there that you mentioned.
Is this mine?
I think so. This is
Okay.
Rakestraw's.
Yes,
So
and
you're-
see, it's all the way back, and our property goes way back to and ends about the same place back there.
So up here also?
Huh?
So up here this way and over here?
Yeah. And there's a fence all the way down here, and a fence all around there.
So which is the rezoning
The
request?
purple striped parcel.
This one's right there.
Right there.
Where your area is.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the.
No, that's where my house is, right there.
I think your house is right there on that little 2-acre
Oh, okay.
parcel right there.
Okay. Well, that fence
that's
is
your
all the way
farm.
back,
And that's your farm parcel right there. So you're right next door.
and that's my farm over here,
Across.
and across the road.
And across down here too, yes.
Yeah.
So none of your lands at all are included in this rezoning request. And they
Okay.
could not be without your express permission.
Okay.
And your name?
Lynn Cochran.
We can't hear.
I tend to mumble. I try to speak up, but the acoustics in this room are bad, and I apologize.
They are. You need to do something about it.
heard that.
I can't hear, but I really can't hear here.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for
I
Ms.
hope that
Sharp?
was helpful.
Okay,
I'd like to make a comment to Ms. Sharp.
sure.
Ms. Sharp, I appreciate that history class because that's been a beautiful farm, and I never really knew where it came from. Thank you.
Well, I'm proud of it.
You should be.
Dara W. Jeffers.
That's
Can you
that's Dura.
Okay,
Dura.
Go ahead and state your name and address for us,
Dura
please.
Webb Jeffers, 1231 Hudson Road, Summerfield. Have allergies, I can scratchy voice. I am Marilyn Sharp's niece, and I spent many days and hours on Sitting Rock Farm riding horses. So I know the place great. Wish it could stay the way it was and wish I could still ride the horses there. However, I have some questions and concerns. The concern is water, water, and sewer. My aunt dug a well approximately 10 years ago when she built her new home, and it went 486 feet deep, and she has 1 gallon per minute. And I know how she feels, so I live on Hudson Road, and I have water issues too. I'll say we would like to request, in addition to the required setbacks, that a deeper buffer zone be installed between the two properties to provide mitigation, protection, and privacy from all parties. Because we have hunters over here, and we'll have children and nice people over there too. And Marilyn has been broken into several times, so we're really concerned about her safety. And, you know, kids do get in trouble. There, as Marilyn told Mr. Cochran, that there is a chain link fence there, and there's a lot of trees along that line too. We'd like to conserve as many mature trees as possible. A buffer of other evergreens, and as I said, deeper than just your setback. Because hunters, you know, if they can visually see, that will help them. A berm would be great, but if the chain link fence, if he could work with that, maybe add some more trees, because up toward the highway there is not much. And we would also like to request the owner, Mr. Rexstraw, I don't know whether he's the developer as well, that the survey be marked clearly and that he notify me and my aunt, Ms. Sharp, when it will be surveyed. And I have a real purpose for asking for this. When Bethany surveyed our property, surveyed the property they bought for the school, they literally took our land. We had to have it surveyed, and they literally had to bring our land back. So you can really get in trouble when a surveyor that's just gotten out of school and says what a guide wire is a marker. Their kids said the guide wire is a marker. And so that threw off the whole line. And they had, anyway, taken away a lot of the dirt, and they had to bring it back. So that is it. That's a respectful request. And Harry Rakestraw is a great man. And I hope that you all will ask him to consider these things.
Well, ma'am, the only thing that's before us tonight is rezoning. We're not considering any specific development permit.
Okay.
So we're just rezoning the property tonight.
Okay. Well, he will be working with Mr.
Sure,
Rakestraw
right.
in the meantime.
Right. There were
Right, I was just going to add that at this point, that sort of condition can't be considered, but when we get to the
Okay.
development's point,
Okay.
all of that comes into play, landscape buffers and roadways and that kinds of thing.
Okay.
And that goes through what's called the technical review committee process, and that is a public process that you can participate in when that happens. And we can get your contact information before you leave tonight and make sure that you know when that meeting might be. It'll probably be a few months away from now.
That'd be
But we can let you know.
excellent.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Thank you all so much.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Jeffers? Thank you, ma'am. Monty Henson, can you state your name and address, please?
Monty Henson, 1221 Washburn Road, right across the street from the property.
What would you like us to know about the application?
Well, I have to apologize, this is my first rodeo, so I may be asking some questions that aren't pertinent tonight, but it's a little bit more about my ignorance. What little I know about rezoning from RA to RP is you're allowed to put more people on a certain area of property. Is that not the case? Density,
No, residential protected would be more restricted.
more restricted in terms of less houses on a certain square
I'll add that it's more restrictive as to the type of housing that can be constructed within the subdivision.
Okay.
That is the eventual goal here. But you are right in that there is a decrease in the minimum lot size if you rezone to residential protected, which is an incentive for developers.
Okay.
To create compact development with a lower footprint on the environment than would be with a 1 acre parcel for each lot.
So
Is part of the goal there.
if I'm hearing you right, it's more protected, like it sounds, like you can, I know you can't put like so many people on a square foot or square acre because of
Right.
water, sewer.
Right. All of that limits the
things like
size
that.
of the lots.
Right.
Additionally, the residential protected district does not allow for manufactured housing. It only allows for modular homes and site-built homes.
Right. That wouldn't be allowed with the protected. The modular homes
Right.
or
Only the modular homes or site-built is allowed in residential protected,
only modular homes are? Okay.
or site-built homes.
Is there a area, like an area that's required, or a certain, you can't, I mean, like 3 acres per lot, one house per acre, or is there
Not in
some
this
kind of
area.
restriction on that?
Not in this area. There are some areas of the county, especially that have to do with watersheds, or if they are in the major subdivision overlay of the county. I don't want to get too far into planning speak.
Well,
But there are other determinants of lot size, but with the residential protected class in this area, the minimum lot size for each lot would be 30,000 square feet.
what is that in
If-
acres, do you know?
If that's what the ultimate goal of the developer is.
Well, can I ask what this guy's planning to do with it? I mean, is it fair to ask that at this point?
At this point, we don't know for
Okay.
sure. All we know for sure at this point is he's requested rezoning from RA to RP.
Okay. Okay, say, everybody has to assume at this point that he's going to put a development in. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. So if that's the case, you're going to put more people on that road. We have a dangerous intersection that I would like to see go away on 220, which is probably not part of this, but it's the one that crosses over 220 going towards Greensboro. That's a terrible intersection. So if we add more people on that road, which doesn't sound like we're going to add that many, compared to Walls down Gold Hill, but that's the concern I have, is more people crossing over that bad intersection. Have y'all heard of that ever going away?
Well, again, you're getting into sort of requirements imposed on the development at this point.
Right.
And consistently, historically, this board requires things like traffic impact studies and things. And at that
Right.
point, there may be additional improvements that are required of the developer, but that's not really something
Yeah.
that we're considering tonight.
Right, okay. I'm thinking that's all I have, but that can be addressed at a later date when it comes to what they're actually going to do with that
It
property.
usually is.
Yeah, okay. All right, I think that's all the questions I have.
Does anyone have questions for Mr. Henson?
I have an answer for him.
What is the
It says City Rock Farms.
glasses?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I can sit down and read this. Do you mind? Oh, I'll get right back to you. That's all I have.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Henson? Thank you, sir. Is there any discussion by the board about the application in front of us, case 2019-009? If not, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval or denial of the application.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion
Yes, sir.
to recommend approval for zoning amendment with the following statements as required by North Carolina General Statute 153A-341. The board has determined that zoning amendment is consistent with the Rockingham County Comprehensive Plan. The proposed zoning amendment, case 2019-009, is appropriate for the proposed land use and is consistent with all other maps and plans officially adopted by the Board of Commissioners. The board has determined that the zoning amendment is consistent with Rockingham County Land Use Plan. As a whole, this zoning amendment supports the intent and descriptions of the rural transition land class. That's all.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All opposed, like sign. Okay, the motion passed, so the board is recommending approval of the rezoning, and this will go before the county commissioners. When, Mr. Cochran?
The county commissioners will hear the final hearing and make a decision on September the 16th.
September 16th, the county commissioners will consider this in this room.
Another round of postcards will be mailed out, and it will be advertised in the local newspaper.
Okay. Next case, 2019-010.
Our next case is essentially a carbon copy of this one, just on a different parcel, but it's a bit larger with a different applicant. Mr. James Smith, who I have been notified cannot attend this evening, is under contract to buy a 118-acre parcel of land denoted by the taxman here. It's located on Gideon Grove Church Loop, just south of Velvet Road and not very far north of Simpson Road. He is requesting rezoning of the entire parcel at present, which is 118 acres. This area is not in the major subdivision overlay of the county. It's located in the Huntsville Township in the rural transition land class of the county, just like the other parcel request ones. We've received 2 basic inquiry phone calls regarding this request. This is for a straight rezoning, just as the other. Therefore, no current considerations of uses or future uses can be taken into account when making the decision to recommend denial or approval. Again, there is one thing I would add here. This is an aerial snapshot that shows there is an area on the far western portion of the parcel that is subject to a 1 in 100% flood event, a 100-year floodplain, an area of enhanced risk for floods. The development of the parcel anywhere beyond that flood hazard is perfectly safe and allowed, but that is just something to note. There are a few wetlands along this creek on this area that would have to be maintained, and of course any development would have to maintain riparian buffers when that comes. The lots here will be served by individual water and septic. Again, this is a straight rezoning. The board must consider all uses allowed in the residential protected district. North Carolina statute prohibits architectural standards to be required for 1 and 2 family dwellings not offered by the applicant. None have been offered. Home price cannot be considered in the rezoning. Thus, in sum, it is staff's recommendation for approval of this request from residential agricultural to residential protected. And I'll just cite the land use plans, the exact same ones that support Mr. Rakestraw's request in the exact same area, sort of match this one. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have questions for Mr. Cochran? Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anybody that wants to speak about this application? Okay, we don't have any public speakers. Is there any discussion by the board about this application? From my perspective, I do see this as different from Mr. Rakestraw's because the parcel that we're looking at is not adjacent to any other residential protected parcels.
It is not immediately adjacent to other residential protected parcels. You are correct about that. It's pretty much surrounded by RA parcels. However, there are residential protected parcels nearby. And additionally, you basically have put, there's a mirror. You're on the mirror side of US 220 from where the other parcel was. You're still close enough to 220 where you've got quite a bit of commercial and industrial development. And in the transition zone, there would be nothing, especially in the rural transition class, there would be nothing specifically that speaks against this. The rural transition class, more than anything, supports compact and well-planned residential development.
Is there any other discussion by the board about this application? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval or denial of the requested zoning amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
That in recommending approval for the zoning amendment before the planning board, the board hereby adopts the following statements as required by North Carolina General Statute, Section 153A-341. The board has determined that the zoning amendment is consistent with the Rockingham County Comprehensive Plan. The proposed zoning statement, case number 2019-010, is appropriate for the proposed land use and is consistent with all other maps and plans officially adopted by the Board of Commissioners. The board has determined that the zoning amendment is consistent with the Rockingham County Land Use Plan. As a whole, this zoning amendment supports the intent and descriptions of the rural transition land class.
Okay. There's a motion on the table. Is there a second? Second. Okay. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, like sign. Okay, the motion passed. The board is recommending approval of rezoning to residential protected in case 2019-010. Our next case, I guess, is 2019-011. Yes, I guess right.
Let's spice it up a little bit. We have a neighborhood commercial request. I'm just kidding. I'll bring it along anyway. Case 2019-001 has been requested by Mrs. Joyce Hall and Mrs. Jean Shropshire. They own a small parcel of land just north of the Reedsville ETJ line, in between Reedsville and Eden. They're in the urban transition land class. This parcel is in the Ruffin Township. However, it is right at the corner of where Wentworth, Reedsville, and Ruffin Townships all converge. So it's really kind of part of all three. There have been no phone calls regarding this request. This request is specifically for a conditional rezoning. Only the conditional uses chosen by the applicant may be considered. No other considerations of current or future uses can be taken into account when making a decision to recommend approved denial of this request. And the applicants are certainly welcome to discuss, what they've chosen as their list. If you can look at the map, the tiny little rectangle in the center is this parcel. It's 0.62 acres. They do have access to public water there, which brings the minimum lot size requirement down, and therefore they do qualify for the neighborhood commercial minimum lot size requirement. They'll be, if not have already, will be adding on to the public water tap to bring that lot size down. There's private septic on site. It currently is currently zoned RA, but has become sort of a plan for a small-scale neighborhood-based business that I'll let applicants describe a little bit better. I'll finish up my official report. This meets all the requirements for neighborhood commercial zoning with public water supply and private septic disposal with conditional uses in this district. It is appropriate to request the rezoning. Keep in mind that development of property for non-residential use will also be subject to the site and design and landscaping requirements for non-residential zoning districts. We're in the urban land class here. The statement here is a bit different. It's lands where government plans to accommodate moderate to high-density development during the following 20-year period, and is recommended overall for moderate to high-density land development. Additional recommendations for lands in this class are to locate neighborhood commercial centers adjacent to collector streets or local streets and near other neighborhood facilities such as schools and parks integrated into the design and circulation of the residential neighborhoods they serve, to facilitate commercial uses developed by consolidation and deepening of existing commercially zoned property. I'll show you the map in a moment. And encourage new commercial development to locate within areas of existing commercial activity. As you can see, this parcel is located quite close to NC-14. There are many neighborhood and highway commercially zoned parcels. Most of these parcels along NC-14 are zoned for much more high-intensity uses that are being requested. We did, of note, speak with the planning director for the city of Reidsville, since this is so close to the Reidsville extraterritorial jurisdiction. She was quite comfortable with the neighborhood commercial rezoning class with conditional uses as far as their land use plan uses for this area go. So therefore, we feel like sufficient information has been provided. The conditional uses may be discussed. No other conditions should be referred to. And we feel like this is a very reasonable request that fits with the intent of the land use plan and current uses in the local community, allowing the benefits of limited commercial development while posing minimal effects to existing residential districts. If you'll notice on the next slide, I've listed out sort of separately from the plan that you have. The one that you have shows the chosen uses highlighted, which is one way to look at it. This is another way to look at it. These are the only uses the applicants have selected for the district. They've ruled out all of the potential uses. So if you'd like to consider these uses. And I did include, I think in your packet, if we didn't, it's not in, but it's near the floodway for, I believe, Hogan's Creek. Is that creek? What's the creek that's name? I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the creek, but there is a significant creek there with a flood zone and a floodway. However, this parcel does not rest in it. Also of note, this parcel itself is completely surrounded by an RA-zoned parcel, which is a 9-hole golf course. So that's kind of a residential use that's, a semi-commercial use that's allowed in a residential district. So there's already some commercial activity going on all around this parcel as it is. And with that, I'll shut up and answer some questions.
Does anyone have questions for Mr. Cochran?
I have a question for you, Mr. Cochran. Would this constitute spot zoning?
It wouldn't. We considered that, but given the fact that there's so much commercial zoning right there on NC-14, given that this is located in the urban transition land class, those two factors alone are strong supporters of the fact that this is an allowable and acceptable zoning, and the fact that they are also surrounded by a parcel which is, even though zoned RA, has a use in place that is partially commercial, a private golf club.
Well, this is not the first time this spot zoning issue has arisen in the last few months.
It's come up
And
quite a bit.
I would think that the board would appreciate something that would legally define spot zoning for us.
That is something that we can likely provide. There's not a strict legal definition of exactly what constitutes spot zoning. There might be a definition of what spot zoning is in sort of a nebular fashion. And nowhere does it say specifically that spot zoning has to do with the parcel differing from exactly adjacent parcels, or spot zoning that differs from parcels within half a mile or 1 mile or 2 miles. There's a lot of contextual interpretation that's left to local jurisdiction. It's when you greatly exceed what would be the normal intent of the land use plan and the nearby and adjacent uses that you have to consider spot zoning. If you remember the case last year that was quite controversial, I won't name the case or the number, but happened about this time last year, that We recommended denial for, that you guys voted, recommended denial for, because it was a highway commercial request, smack in the middle of residential property and school areas with no other commercial within a mile radius. That's sort of an arbitrary judgment on our part as far as choosing how far out a zoning radius goes, but there was no way to justify that request for that district with that condition in that area, especially in the context of the land use plan, which called for more neighborhood commercial and rural commercial type establishments. And that proposal ended up going nowhere. But that proposal, we had specific concerns about spot zoning. I will say, just in general commentary to that, spot zoning is being addressed in some creative ways, especially in urban areas, and we're beginning to see more of it here, more of a lean towards conditional use zoning. With conditional use zoning, it allows the applicant to select which uses will best suit their needs and their desires and their rights as a private property owner, on balance with the public health, welfare, safety, and community development needs of the county. And so this is this type of zoning request, which reduces even more the degree of concern about spot zoning. If there were no other commercial zoning anywhere near, if this was not in the urban transition land class, I would have much deeper reservations about possible spot zoning. But given those two main factors, I don't have any reservations about this. But that is something that we can help you guys with, sort of outside the meeting schedule, with sort of, because even for planners, it's hard sometimes. And for a board, it can be even more difficult, and the commissioners themselves too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that discussion.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What is the zoning classification of the golf course?
The golf course, which is allowed, is residential agricultural. You can have a golf course on an RA zoned parcel. It's one of those quasi uses, just like you can have a wireless telecom facility, a tower, on a residential agricultural parcel, or you can have a solar energy facility on a residential agricultural parcel. It's sort of the way our land classes are structured, our zoning classes are structured. And the RA class allows for a broad amount of uses, especially when it comes to special use permits. It's to allow flexibility in the ordinance that otherwise wouldn't be there in a district that would otherwise be pretty much set up just for very low density housing and agricultural uses. So yes, a golf course is allowed, and it is permitted in this case, and it has been in existence for quite some time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Cochran? Thank you, sir. No one has signed up to speak to this. Do the applicants wish to come tell the board anything about your application? State your name and address, please.
Jeannie Shropshire, and it's 7618 Summerfield Road in Summerfield.
What would you like us to know?
This all started out as a hobby and has grown into more than we had ever planned on. We enjoy it. It's something that was to keep my parents kind of busy since they retired, and it's just it's a lot of fun. But we meet a lot of interesting people from all over that come to see us, because we find things here in our area that people are getting rid of that are really worth keeping. And so we just kind of take it and fix it up a little bit and pass it on to the next person. But we're wanting to be able, I guess, to expand just a little bit as a business, and to help to bring more things here for Rockingham County. I'm from Rockingham County and have recently moved to Summerfield, but I've always been one that has been a person to buy locally I want to keep things here. So we have a lot of unique items that we're able to find in some of the old farms, some of the old houses that are being torn down, or old estates that no one wants to claim. And we're able just to keep some of those unique things going and use, for people to still use in their homes and with their families. So that's just what we do.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Shropshire? Thank you, ma'am. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak about this? Okay. Is there any discussion by the board about the application? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval or denial of the requested rezoning.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to recommend approval. That the board hereby adopts the following statements as required by North Carolina General Statute 153A-341. The board has determined the zoning amendment is consistent with the Rockingham County Comprehensive Plan. The proposed zoning amendment, case 2019-11, is appropriate for the proposed land use and is consistent with all other maps and plans officially adopted by the Board of Commissioners. The board has determined that zoning amendment is consistent with the Rockingham County Land Use Plan. As a whole, this zoning amendment supports the intent and descriptions of the urban transition and rural land class.
There's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor of recommending approval of the zoning amendment, please signify by raising your right hand. All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes, so we are recommending approval to the county commissioners, and they'll hear it in this room in September.
Okay.
Okay. We've got a text amendment to be considered. Is that correct?
Yes, last order of business is quite brief. We've essentially been begged by our county surveyors for a tiny text amendment. This is to one of the certifications that goes on plats when they're signed. It's called the the Certificate of Ownership and Dedication. For many years, our ordinance has required notarization of the owner's signatures. That is really no longer statewide practice. Very few, actually, jurisdictions practice it any longer. We did an area poll. Many of them don't even require an attestation. Greensboro and Winston-Salem do require an attestation. So to streamline the plat review process, to sort of ease the burden on all the multiple certifications our surveyors have to complete for us to comply with our reviews for all of our ordinances, we'd like to make these minor changes. One tiny change in language to Part B of enforcement of deed restrictions, remove the notary requirement, and change that to attest. The owners will sign, and then the surveyor will attest that these owners of the land, these are the owners of the land. And that's really it to the whole text amendment, is that teeny little bit. Any questions? We've got an answer. Tim gave me a look.
The language where we change affected violations to subject to deed restrictions.
Right.
Are we reducing the universe of people who are allowed to sue to enforce deed restrictions by changing that language?
We are not. We are actually making it broader by that language. Instead of stating is the sole responsibilities of the parties affected by violations of such deed restrictions and contractual agreements, it's everyone who's subject to those. Basically saying that by signing this, you are saying Rockingham County holds absolutely no responsibility for enforcing, validating, or backing you up against any claims regarding your deed restrictions and covenants. Those are all your issue to deal with between you and the developer, period.
So neighboring parcels right now are arguably affected. Neighboring parcels that aren't subject to the deed restrictions are arguably affected if people violate, if the people in more protected property next door to them.
Oh,
So we're reducing it to only people who are subject to the deed
only
restrictions.
those persons who are subject to deed restrictions. Yep.
That may be appropriate.
Yeah, I see your thinking. I see your thinking. That is, but we don't have to change that. That was a suggested change to clarify it. But if you guys feel strongly about it, we do not have to change that. We can leave it worded exactly as it is, if you feel like that would be more effective. We just felt like changing it to subject to would provide the broader umbrella of anyone, anywhere, who is signing on to purchasing land that may be subject to deed covenants and restrictions. This is what you understand. That the enforcement of deed restrictions and any other contractual arrangements is not the responsibility of Rockingham County, will not be undertaken by Rockingham County, and is the sole responsibility of the parties subject to such deed restrictions. So I see what you're saying.
I think it's probably appropriate.
What if they violate their deed restrictions by somehow encroaching on someone else's property that is not part of that? I understand that. That is then covered by county law. If it's an encroachment or something that is beyond the scope of the deed restrictions, say a storage building placed 5 feet from someone else's property line, then that becomes a zoning issue. That is something that we enforce. That's not a deed. Are you trying to think of a specific instance where?
Well, it seems to me that only people who are in the subdivision can sue their neighbors to enforce the deed restrictions. People who live outside the subdivision can't, the way that we're proposing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Well, actually, then perhaps we could propose a change of wording from either of
I think
these.
it may be appropriate. I
Yeah.
think the change is probably appropriate.
Yeah, the change to subject to, you think so? Okay. As long as you're sure.
Well, I'm just, that's my thoughts. There's 7 members of the board. So.
There are 7 members of the board, and it would not be any problem at all to say, is the sole responsibility of the project parties subject to such deed restrictions or affected by?
I wish I hadn't brought it up.
You sure?
I was just trying to make sure that I understood what the.
Were you thinking with your attorney hat? Is that what you're doing? Yeah.
I was just trying to make sure I understood what the
Yeah.
was.
The intent is to be much broader than just saying affected by violations.
Yeah.
But I see what you're thinking is that could leave out someone who's not in that district. But if they're not in that district and they're,
Not in the subdivision. Yeah.
I can't think of it, well, yeah.
Your suggestion for the addition of the words "or affected by" would seem to cover that.
Yeah, well, we could definitely add that.
More broadly.
Yeah.
Again, I wish I'd never brought it up. So.
But there are other members on the board. Please, I'll be glad to. This is a text amendment. You guys have a chance to say what it's going to say.
Yeah, is there any discussion by the board, and does anyone have any thoughts about the text amendment that's been presented by the staff?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
In addition to the highlighted word "subject to," and then it reads "such deed restrictions," I would like to see "or affected by" added in.
Does,
Subject to or affected by.
Subject to or affected by.
Yes.
That's perfectly reasonable. Yeah.
and of course, I'll leave that to whoever plans to make a motion, but are there any other changes that anyone else on the board would like to see made before someone makes a motion? Okay. Is there any other discussion about the text amendment at all? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the text amendment or approve it with an amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the text amendment with the words "subject to or affected by such deed restrictions and contractual agreement."
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor of approving the text amendment with that modification, please signify by raising your right hand. Any opposed, like sign.
Very good. It'll be heard by the commissioners next month on the 16th.
Okay.
Thank you. There was to be a small land use plan update tonight. We are scheduled to receive on our calendar, and this is all I've seen from Carrie and the consultant. His father's been quite ill for quite some time now. We are scheduled to receive the existing land use conditions this week. That's all I can say is we are scheduled to. No guarantees. That's what's on, it's on our calendar that has been stated by the consultant that he's going to get those to us. And I spoke with most of you beforehand, but this will be my last planning board meeting that I'll be attending. I've accepted a position with the Piedmont Triad Regional Commission, and my last day here with the county will be a week from tomorrow. And it's been a great pleasure working with all of you. And I talk about what an exemplary board you guys are to the folks in the community. And I'm going to treasure those connections that I made up here and the work that I've done with you guys.
Well, we certainly appreciate the work that you've done
Thank you.
and the help that you've been to us.
Thanks.
When is our next meeting?
There will not be a second August meeting. The next meeting for the planning board will be September 9th.
Okay. Is there any other business to be considered by the board tonight? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, come
Mr.
on.
Chairman, I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second. Okay, motion made and seconded. All those in favor of adjourning, raise your right hand. Okay, we're adjourned.